Hi guys, Deanna Falchuk here from Hot for History, and I'm really excited tonight to be sharing with you a story that I have had on my short video, which is about an experience that I've had at God's Acre Cemetery when visiting my great, I think it's 7 times removed grandfather. It's a story about angels. It's a story about faith. It's a story about ancestry. And it's a pretty supernatural story, but I do have the short version of it, and it has done really, really well, um, on YouTube and on Facebook and TikTok. And I'm really super excited to share with you the whole story. So a lot of times with the shorts, it's very hard to really capture what the entire backstory is. And there were so many questions that came up about the story. Hey guys, so I want to go back a little bit, if you don't mind, so that you guys can see the full picture, because there were a lot of unanswered questions when we're talking about a 1700-ish grave in a kind of for me, it was a space that I didn't even realize existed. So here's the backstory. I am from Illinois originally, and I've lived all over. And during this time, I had lived in North Carolina. I live in Florida now. But it was around the year 2007, 2008. I was invited to Moravian Falls. I was living in Raleigh-Durham. I was invited to Moravian Falls with about 10 women into this big lodge. I am the mom of 7 kids, 5 that are internationally adopted. And I wanted to go there actually to pray, because we had adopted 3 kids and I have friends who were adopting, and that was it. That was the premise. I was raised Lutheran in Illinois. Strong faith, but nothing woo-woo, right? And I had no expectations of anything other than praying and just really just communing with the Lord and my friends, right? So at the same time, another little piece of the story is that my mother, who I wasn't living with at the time, she was getting up in age, had spent years studying genealogy. And this part of the story, and she was so detailed. This was before the internet, and well, there was email, but she did all of this genealogy from her side of the family and my dad's side of the family. And this story is really about my dad's side of the family. So I went up. I've been in entertainment my whole life. It was like the night before I went to Moravian Falls. I had this gig in New York City, took a plane to Raleigh-Durham, got in a car, drove to Moravian Falls. It was January, so it was a little bit cold. I get to this lodge, and there were like 10 other women, but most of them had gone to sleep already, because by the time I arrived, it was like 11 p.m. So I was like, this is really cool. I knew no backstory of the area. I didn't really care. I was just, we're going to have a good time. I'm going to relax. It's been stressful. Let's just relax. So I go there and I head up to the second level of the lodge, and there was like a landing, like a porch that goes out in the lodge. And I saw this, what I thought was a very tall woman with these blue scarves, because it just looked like she was like dancing, and the whole porch was lit up. So I'm like, well, I just got here. I'm going to go hang out with them, but let me put my bag down. So I went into my room, put my bag down, turned around, went back to the porch, and it was pitch black. Like whoever was out there wasn't there. Still, I'm just thinking, oh, I guess they all went to bed. So Jen, we have something in common, Illinois and Florida. So then I go to bed, and I feel like sometimes when God does things, it's best when you're unsuspecting, when you don't have these expectations, right? So I go to bed, and all night, and again, I know this may sound woo-woo to you, but sometimes supernatural is so natural that you don't believe that it's not, like it just seems natural. But I remember I was trying to go to sleep, and all I could hear were loud, in the distance, but it was still loud and active, choirs of angels singing. Like, well, I didn't think they were angels. I thought they were actual choirs, right? So I hear these like choirs of people. I'm like, why are it so loud? I just want to go to sleep. It's so loud. They're singing, and like this happens all night. So the next day I get up and we're all really excited to see each other and we're kind of hanging out. And I realize as I start talking to people that nobody was on the deck and nobody was out singing. And then that was when they all told me the story of where I was. Moravian Falls was this beautiful place in Winston-Salem, and the area had been prayer walked 24/7 by these Moravians. Now, I wasn't necessarily super into history like I am now. I have this Hot for History channel and, I'm into it, really into it now, but I wasn't really at the time. So I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. But the Moravians, when you research it, they kind of broke off from the Catholic Church too. And they kind of even predated at one point Martin Luther, and they hung out in Germany with these, his name was Count Zinzendorf. He was protecting them from being totally persecuted and basically killed. And so when the Moravians came over to America, they actually had to go from Germany, get a boat, and make some kind of deal with the Brits and say, hey, when we get over there, we'll work the land for you and we'll owe everything to you and we'll fight for you, right? But they went over, and that was the backstory of the Moravians. And they went so far west, like North Carolina was considered really far west, that it was the wild, wild west. Like there were Native Americans there, lots of them, especially the Cherokee. And they were basically communing with them. They were really the only group of people who were not, at war with the native tribes. They were hanging out with them. So that's the backstory. But the other thing is that they got this huge tract of land and they prayer walked it 24/7 for 100 years. Back to my experience. I knew nothing like that. All I was doing was going to this place to chill out and pray. And that was the place where I ended up hearing angels. I realized that that's what I was hearing, and then seeing them. So I had all of these experiences, not expecting it. And it just felt natural, but it was also like, wow, this is so cool. So it ended up that I kept going back there like every single year. And it was like I would pray, and many times it was for these adoptions. And like I said, I've adopted 5 kids. I have 7 kids altogether. And so we would go back. Well, I don't know, maybe it was the 5th or 6th year was when I sort of was like, my mother keeps saying that like I have like, like not Moravian ancestors. She said some ancestors from your dad's side. My parents were divorced since I was 9, right? From your dad's side over in North Carolina. And I always wondered, I was like, wait, I wonder if they were like kind of from like, where were they from? But I never really researched it. Moving forward, it was about, my mother passed away in 2019. So right before that, probably 2017, 2018. Now this is almost 10 years, maybe 8 years since I started going there. And I was like, whoa. And I started researching it. And I realized at that point that I found this guy, Martin Walk. And I found the family name was the Walk. And there was always this, my family, I love them so much. Like my Illinois family, the Jones side, that's my maiden name. We love like hillbilly jokes. That's just us. Who else loves hillbilly jokes? So anyhow, the one joke that we always had in our family was a foot married a walk. You got it. So anyhow, so I found out that the Walks had been in that area. And then not only that, but I found out that the very place I had been going for years was the land of my forefathers. So in other words, I had been praying there. I had been hearing things, which was so weird. I developed since that trip. And I know that it's kind of woo-woo. I don't like to talk about it that much, but I do have this thing where I can hear, supernaturally. So that happened when I was there, but I was basically going back every year praying in the land of my forefathers. Remember, I'm from Illinois. Now I live in Florida. And so I had been living in North Carolina, but I was like an hour and a half from this space, and it's kind of a remote spot. And I had not been into the mountains there, right outside of Winston-Salem. So then if my mother passed away, a few years go by, and then here we are to the story that I'm trying to tell you. And the story, if you haven't seen it, it's a 1-minute video that I made, because I make shorts usually. This is actually one of my first long form video that I'm having here on Hot for History. But basically, you know, I had not been there. And a lot of people are asking, well, it's not uncommon for something like that to happen, because I didn't know. I really didn't know. So I went there now with my Florida people. So, and I was not raised Moravian. So I went there with my friends from Florida, and we went there to pray. And it was it was that visit that I already done research. And that was in 2021, right? So I am up in Moravian Falls, and I'm praying, and there's a place called Prayer Mountain. I'm praying, and I decide I'm going to take some prayer rocks, and I have to drive like an hour and a half both ways, down the mountain and up the mountain. And I don't like driving late at night, but I want to go to the cemetery of Martin Walk, my great grandfather. So that was the context of the short video that you guys may have seen. If you haven't seen it, look on my shorts. Right now it's my top performing short. I just started my YouTube channel here 4 months ago now. And this particular video has 4.5 million views. And the one on Facebook that I just put up has about 1 million. So, but it's the same story. So anyhow, I take the prayer rock, and I'm going to drive down. Now in my mind, I'm like, it's not going to be that hard to find the grave. I'm just going to go find the grave, and I'm going to respectfully praise the Lord for my relatives, because I have this deep connection to ancestry, especially after my mother passed with all of her genealogy. All of a sudden, I'm like history, genealogy, everything. So I drive down there, but I know I only have a little bit of time, because I don't want to drive up the mountains and the windy road when it's dark. It's just not what I like to do. And it's very steep when you get up to Moravian Falls from Winston-Salem. So I drive down, I find God's Acre Cemetery, and I'm looking for, I'm thinking, I'm just going to find it. I'm going to go there. I'm going to find it. I'm going to spend 15 minutes, put the rock on the thing, praise God, go back up, take some pictures. That was me. So anyhow, I head down, and I look in the cemetery. The Moravians bury their people flat, like in these, like, you know, the graves are in the ground. And right there, I'm like, oh, dang. But then I'm thinking they're probably putting all the old graves in one part and all the new graves in another part. So I'm like, okay, I'll be able to figure it out. It's right across from this church. I'll be able to figure it out. But then I can't find it. And the sun is starting to set, and I see this couple. They're like in their 60s, maybe 70s, walking. And what was funny is that they were listening to Doobie Brothers. It was like, taking it to the street. And then they're like, Jesus is just all right with me. Like they were like walking, like, you know, to that. And it was so funny. But I was like, excuse me, do you come here often? I mean, imagine, do you come here often? I'm like, oh, I'm so weird. I'm so weird. You know, they make jokes with me, and I go, I'm looking for my grandfather, which I thought was a funny line, but that's what I was saying. And they're like, your grandfather? I'm like, yeah, he died like over 300 years ago, but his name's Martin Walk. Now, what I don't know is that this couple, they're members of the church across the street. Okay. The woman, her name's Karen. She was raised Methodist, and Eddie, the guy that's walking with her, and her husband, he was raised a Moravian in that church across the street. So, but they walk for exercise. They don't look like they're doing anything spiritual there. They're like getting their exercise. And I know a lot of people who walk. Yes, I know a lot of people who walk in the cemeteries. So, or jog in the cemeteries, or learn how to drive in the cemeteries. It's a thing. Sorry. But I say, hey, I'm sorry, I'm looking for my grandfather. They're like, well, let me help you. I'm like, no, I don't really want to bother you. And the woman, Karen, she's like, no, let me help you. I said, well, do you know where the older graves are? And she explains to me that the Moravians don't get buried just with their families. They get buried in these choirs. A choir is a group of people that they put together based on age that do community together with each other, like always. So Martin Walk's grave wouldn't be like with his wife's grave or his kid's grave. So I'm like, crap. So she said, let's just look. I'm like, okay, the sun is setting, the sun is setting. And I'm like getting nervous. It took her 5 minutes to find the grave. Karen found the grave in 5 minutes. Now, to describe the grave, it was flat in the ground, surrounded like it's square, but 75% was covered with grass. And she's pulling grass, and she's wiping things down. Now, she and the guy, Eddie, are totally embarrassed. Why? Because they're part of the church across the street, and they're like, it shouldn't happen like this. It should be easy for you to just find the grave, and there shouldn't be grass over it because you should be able to visit your family. And I just thought it was funny. And then she found it. I said my little prayer, and I was like, are you guys sure you're not angels? Because I cannot believe that you just found that grave like this. And they were flattered. They kept walking around. I was saying my little prayer. Then we had a conversation. And what I found out was that Eddie's relatives were like the same generation as this guy, Martin Walk, last name Foltz, down ways where his great grandfather was. I live in front of cemetery, and we walk through every day. I learned to drive. See, that's how it goes. So then what happens is I exchange numbers because I'm so amazed that I was amazed that this already happened. I was like, wow, she found the grave. That is so cool. I cannot wait to go back and tell everybody. But she wanted to know the name of my ancestors. And my other aunt, she goes, I think there's some more people with that name. They explained to me that she was raised Methodist. She was not involved with the Moravians, but down the road ways. And then Eddie was like, oh, well, I was raised in this church for generations, right? So fast forward 1 or 2 days go by. Karen calls me on the phone because we had exchanged things. And she says to me, she goes, Deanna, you won't believe what happened. And I'm like, what? She goes, this is unbelievable. I said, what? And she said, that grave of Martin Walk, that is your great-grandfather, it's also my great-grandfather. And remember, he was born in 17 something. I can't remember the exact year, but he died in 1791. So we were there over this grave. The woman walking around ended up finding out that one of Martin's sons was my great-grandfather. One of Martin's daughters was her great-great-great-great-grandmother. Now, it gets even more interesting because then what we discover, we start reading the history, was that Eddie's relatives, now remember, this couple is married. They don't know any of this. Eddie's relatives also knew Martin Walk. Eddie Foltz's grandfather, and then ours, built the church across the street because we found these old Moravian archives that show that they built the church. And now what we know is that Karen and Eddie have a family history. They're not related, but their families both built the church that they're now members of, that she was not raised in as a Methodist. And she would not have known that had I not come down from the mountain or whatever. And then since then, she has shown me that we have over 100 relatives in that cemetery. So both she was walking the cemetery for years, not knowing that her family was in that space. And then I was coming to go to prayer retreats for, I have to count the years. I don't know, 8, 9 years altogether, something like that. I was going there for that long, might have been more, like over 10 years or whatever. And I also didn't know that was the land of my forefathers. So that is basically the long version of the story from the shorts when we're talking about the 1700s and the grave of Martin Walk, our ancestors, and how it came that I just ran into my cousin. It was sort of this backstory where it's like, whoa. And so my big question is really like, what do you guys think about that? What is it about kind of diving into ancestry, diving into DNA, diving into our genealogy, and sort of like, I don't know, the connection of ancestry and how these supernatural things happen. It's so fascinating to me because it's just, I don't know. And for me, just a little side note, I would not have known any of this had my mom not taken a dive into her hobby, which was genealogy. I wouldn't be doing Hot for History. I wouldn't be doing all this stuff. And since then, it has just blessed us immensely. So that's the story of the 1700 grave with Martin Walk, and that's the long story. And I just, really wanted to say that, I'm just grateful for all of you guys for giving me the outlet to be able to share. Please subscribe to this channel. I am doing a live. This is not sponsored. This video is not sponsored, but I am an affiliate with a company that has liposomal nutrition technology, especially for skin, especially for women. And we are having a live after this on a Zoom. And if you're interested, comment and I will send you a link. In the meantime, be blessed. And thank you for letting me share my awesome story about this. And I will see you on another video short. Please subscribe. Talk to you later. Bye.